you, Prime Minister. There have been a lot of discussion about banning the burqa, whether it's a good idea or not, from your own MPs and also from CUP senators. Mr Colvin, do you think that's helpful in the current environment, particularly in terms of relations with the Muslim community? And Prime Minister, what's your personal view? Bill Shorten called on you this morning to show some leadership on this issue.
Well, look, I think that the government is showing leadership on all issues all the time. There are a couple of different issues here. The first is the burqa as an item of attire in the general community, and the second is the burqa as an item of attire in a secure building or in a circumstance where people's identity is important. Now, I've said before that I find it a fairly confronting form of attire. Frankly, I wish it was not worn, but we are a free country, we are a free society, and it's not the business of government to tell people what they should and shouldn't wear. We can all have an opinion, we can all have a preference, but in the end it's up to the citizens of Australia to decide what they should wear. It's a little different, obviously, in a situation where people's identity is important. My understanding is that in courts, for instance, people may be required to show their face. In certain buildings, people may be required to show their face, and I think that's perfectly appropriate. It's perfectly appropriate that in certain circumstances people be required to show their face, and there can't be one rule for one form of attire and a different rule for another form of attire. It's got to be the same rules for everyone, and if the rules require you to show your face, well, you show your face.
What about Parliament House? What about Parliament House? Should they show their face there?
Well, this is a secure building, and it's important that people be able to be identified. It's important that people be able to be recognised as the people for whom a pass has been issued. In the end, it's a matter for the presiding officers and for the security controller of the building. But this is a secure building, and it's got to be governed by the rules appropriate for a secure building.
They should not be worn to Parliament House.
Look, could I caution people about making mountains out of molehills? Has anyone ever sought entry to this building so attired? As far as I'm aware, no. And making a big song and dance about a hypothetical, I'm not sure is particularly helpful, but I just want to stress that this is a secure building and it should be governed by the rules that are appropriate for a secure building, and obviously people need to be identifiable in a secure building such as this.
The opinion of the Commissioner Delegate on whether or not it's a security threat?
Sorry, they're pestering you for your view.
Look, let me say a few things. I don't think it's appropriate for us to comment on speculation and different scenarios. Police in this country is done without fear or favour in all circumstances, and I think, as the Prime Minister said, we need to be careful not to make something of an issue that police deal with each and every day in suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne. We have seen instances where there have been matters taken to court before where certain headdress has been asked to be removed. I think we need to deal with each circumstance as it comes. Police are trained to deal with these issues. That's what I would expect of my police. I'm sure my fellow commissioners would expect the same. It's without fear or favour. This isn't about religion, it isn't about particular headdress, it isn't about what somebody may or may not choose to wear. Policing in this country is done in order to provide the freedom so that people can live their life the way they want to live it.
Banned at Parliament House for you and your officers?
No, not necessarily. I think we need to come back to what the Prime Minister said. We need to look at the circumstances where it's appropriate for us to be able to make a certain identification, then we should do that. But I'm not going to buy into whether it should be banned or not banned.
And again, if I could just stress, national security is too important to be made sport of, and we could have a huge national debate over whether or not the burqa should be allowed into Parliament House. But what useful purpose would it serve, given that as far as we are aware, no one has ever sought to enter into the building so attired, and if access was ever sought under those circumstances, it would be dealt with appropriately by our security officers, I'm sure.
Are you making the distinction?
I've noticed whatsoever in Parliament House. The original question was the comments by your backbenchers about people wearing it in the community. Do you think that's helpful to the whole Team Australia push and to convince the Islamic community that this is not about them, it's about a crime?
And the point I've made repeatedly in recent months is that we are interested in combating crime. We wouldn't for a moment target particular communities or particular religions because not only is it wrong, but it's un-Australian. We have always extended a warm and generous welcome to people from all countries, all cultures, all faiths. That's never going to change. And what impresses me, the longer the current security issue lasts, is the enthusiasm that just about every single Australian has for our country and for our freedoms. And that includes, whether I might like it or not, whether I might prefer it or not, that includes the freedom to wear whatever you want under normal circumstances.
Has a date been set for when Australian involvement might commence, and can you just clarify what you're still waiting on before a final decision?
Okay. Well, David, I will have a little more to say on this in the Parliament. I will make a brief statement to the Parliament, a brief update to the Parliament on our military commitment in the Middle East, and I'm going to leave that discussion till then.
Just on it, Commissioner Colvin.
You'll be the Commissioner of the AFP when the G20 meets in Brisbane later this year. What sort of challenge do you see presented at the G20, and how much have recent events here and internationally increased that challenge for you and your service?
Well, I think the G20 brings with it some unique challenges for both ourselves and the Queensland Police, as well as our colleagues around the country. We have been for quite a long time now working very hard to make sure that the security treatments and the layers of security that we have around the G20 are appropriate. We always plan on the basis of the threat being more than what it may be at the time. So with the threat level recently, the public alert level recently being raised, that hasn't changed our planning as much as it's changed our attitude towards the way our police might respond in certain situations. We have a heightened state of readiness on many fronts. G20 is just another opportunity for us to ensure that our partnership with the Queensland Police is right. Queensland Police have done a wonderful job in preparations. We've seen a number of lead-up meetings to the G20 which have gone through without incident. We'll continue to be vigilant of what the threats may be, but I'm very confident that the plan is right.
Follow up to David's. Just to follow up to David's original question, would you like to see the Colvin era usher in a Homeland-style security agency or governing body like we see in the United States or the UK?
We're already talking about the Colvin era.
Look, I guess what I would say that is, as I said, I'll let the speculation be commented on by others. What I do know is that the government have asked for a review of current counter-terrorism arrangements. We will be a very active and I think an important contributor to that review, and we'll make sure that we give full and frank advice about that. My focus right now, and I think the arrangements that we have served us well for quite a long time. My focus is to make sure they continue to serve us well.
At the moment, it would be a distraction to go down that path.
Look, I think it's always appropriate that we continue to look at our arrangements, particularly in a heightened security environment, to make sure they were optimal. But right now, I think the arrangements are working well. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't review. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at whether changes are appropriate.
Malcolm?
Prime Minister, have you further examined the legal options for deploying Australian units in Syria, or is that a closed matter now for you?
I will be dealing with the current deployment to the Middle East in the Parliament shortly. On the particular question that you asked me, Malcolm, we've never ruled it out. We've just observed that the legalities of operating in Syria are quite different from the legalities of operating in Iraq at the request of the Iraqi government. So I'll just leave it at that. The legalities are different. Frankly, the moralities are the same. ISIL is an apocalyptic death cult. It's a menace to everyone. It's declared war on the world, and it's the same whether it's in Syria or in Iraq. But the legalities are different, and legalities matter to a country such as Australia.
Next question.
I'm just not going to go further into this at this time. Andrew?
Last question. The Americans have used the collective self-defence argument to defend what it's done in Syria. Do we recognise the same doctrine?
The short answer is we do think this is a legitimate basis for international action, but you shouldn't read anything into that in terms of what Australia might or might not do in times to come.
The doctrine.
It's a perfectly legitimate doctrine. It's a perfectly legitimate basis for military action under the right circumstances. And again, as I've said all along, we support the American action in Iraq. We support the American action in Syria. We note that the American action in Syria was supported by Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE, Bahrain and Qatar. So it wasn't just an American action, it was an American action that was powerfully supported with airstrikes from other Middle Eastern nations.
The Treasurer has... Article 51, as I understand it, applies pending consideration by the Security Council. It's not an enduring justification, is it?
Well, I'm not going to get into a lengthy discussion of a hypothetical situation, and you're essentially inviting me to hypothesise about what might happen down the track. Again, if I may caution people, I know as a former journalist exactly how we like to play things. We like to speculate not on what's happening today, but on what might happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. As a government, the important thing is to take a methodical, step-by-step approach to what's needed in our national interest, and that's what this government is doing.
Prime Minister, the Treasurer has flagged that the government's looking for additional savings in the mid-year economic update. Given the government's struggling to gain support for its May budget savings, where are the new savings going to come from?
Thanks for asking me about the budget, because I want to affirm the government's budget strategy. We stand by all of the budget measures. We accept that some budget measures do need to pass the Senate, and we obviously want to put them to the Senate in the form which is most calculated to get passage of the relevant legislation. So in flagging the possible restructuring of the social services legislation, we're not walking away from anything. We support all of the budget measures, but we accept that some of them are supported by other parties, some of them are still subject to negotiation with other parties and with the crossbench. So we don't walk away from anything. We stand by everything, because we inherited a debt and deficit disaster. We inherited a situation where, without change, we're paying $1 billion a month every single month just to pay the interest on Labor's debt. Without change, that's ratcheting up to $3 billion a month. So change is not an optional extra. Change is an absolute necessity for this country if we are to enjoy the prosperity, the employment. If we are to enjoy the quality of life that we are used to, we do have to get our budget under control, and this government is absolutely determined to get us back to broad balance by 2018, as we outlined in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that was live from Parliament.